Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this closing session of the Right to Energy Forum. My name is Felix. I'm advisor at the European Trade Union Confederation. It's the organization that represents workers in Europe. And I will be moderating this webinar today together with Javier Tobias from ECODES. Welcome, Javier, and thanks for co-chairing this with me. Just for your information, this webinar, there is interpretation available both in English and Spanish. And in order to choose your language, you can go on the bottom of your screen. You have a globe for interpretation, and then you can select the language you want to speak. In case you speak, the best for you is to select the original version and then to speak in your language. I think for this session aims at being interactive. So if you want to turn on your cameras, don't hesitate to do so. I think it's always easier for us to know if we are boring or not, if we see the face of the people. So don't hesitate to do so. And then I think we can start. So as I see many faces and names that I don't know in the audience, I'll try in this introduction to set the scene by giving you a few key figures about energy poverty. I will then briefly present the Right to Energy Coalition in a few words. Probably most of you know it already after a few days of Energy Forum. And after that, I will let Javier go through the agenda for today. So let's start with a few key figures about energy poverty in the EU. When we talk about energy poverty, we do not talk about something affecting only a few people. Indeed, we know that 1 out of 4 households in the EU cannot afford to adequately heat, cool, or light their home. We should also keep in mind that energy poverty can take different forms. We know, for example, that 1 out of 10 Europeans cannot properly warm their homes during the winter. And that 1 out of 5 cannot properly cool their homes in the summer, which is often a dimension a bit more forgotten by policymakers. Overall, the European Energy Poverty Observatory estimated that 50 million households in the EU were experiencing energy poverty. And this was estimated before the energy price crisis started. So I think it's already a big red flag that we should all be aware of. And finally, we know that energy poverty affects some regions and countries more than others. On this map, you can see that Eastern and Southern European countries experienced a higher level of energy poverty. But this being said, of course, energy poverty is present in all the member states, and therefore all the member states need to develop policies. So for this reason, given this problem a few years ago, several organizations decided to team up to create the Right to Energy Coalition. And this coalition unites NGOs, trade union, anti-poverty group, health organization, and energy cooperative to tackle the issue of energy poverty. You can see here on the slide the logos and the name of the organization. In case you want to get involved after the forum, of course, don't hesitate to check our website and to contact us, and we would be happy to see whether to involve you. So what we do in a few words, in terms of vision and work, the coalition has several objectives. First, we want to raise awareness on energy poverty at the different levels, from local to European. Second, the coalition does advocacy activities to promote access to affordable energy and ensure energy efficient and affordable housing for all. And finally, the coalition aims at promoting energy democracy and local community projects. So now that I have set the scene, I will leave the floor to Javier to present to you today the agenda and to explain a little bit the objective of this closing session. So Javier,
thank you, Felix. Thank you. So today we will be doing the wrap-up of the whole forum, basically. We have this session from 4 o'clock until 5:30, and then at 5:30 we have the brainstorm, the last brainstorm of the forum, so be there for it, please, so we can do a proper wrap-up. I will be carrying out currently a sort of summary or my summary of the forum so far, and I will propose some of the issues that I think that have to be taken into account for the following year that we can carry out as a coalition and in our personal or each one of our movements to achieve an actual right to energy. And then we will hear from Felix to bring us the labor point of view, and from two of the movements that have already been present throughout the forum, that are the Fuel Poverty Action and the Alliance Against Energy Poverty, to hear what their perspectives are for the following year and what they're going to work on due to the current gas crisis and the current energy crisis to give and to achieve the right to energy for all of their members and for all of us. So Felix, if you don't mind, I will try to share my own screen. Thank you. Okay. Here we go. Hope it's running correctly. So what are the next steps on the right to energy, or what are the next steps to actually reach a right to energy? First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, all the participants, particularly the Right to Energy Coalition, which we are part of as ECODES, which will work on energy poverty and building renovations issues, and particularly to Friends of the Earth Europe for their wonderful organization throughout the whole forum and all the tech support and so on, and also particularly to the translators who are making sessions such as this possible. I would just want to point out firstly that the right to energy can already be considered by some academics to be an existing right. It is not official, and it's not the right to energy, the right to electricity, the right to heating are not referred to as such in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but you can understand that if you consider the right to living adequate standards currently are not possible without an amount of energy and an amount of heating, particularly in some areas. And also, I just wrote down the titles of the different sessions of the whole forum, so you can see just from the titles the broad scope of the issue at hand. It's a scope that works both from a local perspective and from a European perspective, with all the differences that have different territories, but at the same time that can be tackled with common tools. Also, I'd like to point out the wonderful summaries that have been carried out by Alejandro Gil, which will be available. Some of them are already available on Twitter, so don't miss them out. And during the next weeks, they will be all available in the Right to Energy Coalition website and on the different social media. So don't miss them out, because probably they're going to be a better synthesis of the forum than the one I'm going to give you today. Then I just wanted to go over some of the topics or some of the sentences, some of the concepts that maybe were in some cases very prevalent throughout the whole forum, and some of them that they just grabbed me. Again, to point out the broad scope of the problem of energy poverty and how we have to work as a whole to be able to tackle it. We talked a lot about solidarity, how it's a problem that has to be tackled from the grassroots movement perspective. At the same time, how there has to be some regulation, how there has to be some progressive measures that can be applied from a local, a national, and a European perspective, how the funding is an issue, how we need to have some collective action and holistic approaches, basically to accelerate change, because we are already being late to tackle the issue. I'm now going to go through some of the topics that I think we have to at least reflect upon in the near future and in the far future to be able to end up energy poverty. First of all, it was something that was pointed out during several of the sessions, but we are currently seeing already a decent amount of path lockings that we are being submitted, or that we are suffering. For example, if we consider that a fossil fuel heater can last up to 20-25 years, if we aim to stop using fossil fuels in our homes, we are already too late to stop using them by 2030, 2040, and almost by 2050, sorry. We need to point out these issues. We need to point out what are the infrastructures that are being built, what are the technologies that are being applied, and what are the policies that are being passed that will not have an impact only today, but will have a severe impact in 20, 30, 40, 50 years to come. To do so, we have to coordinate our struggles. There is, as we have seen, energy poverty has a broad scope. It's an universal problem that affects many areas. As some of the sessions already pointed out, it's being carried out in many national governments from a ministerial point of view, which already makes it work in a sort of bubbles. But at the same time, as organizations are sometimes working focused or too focused on our scope. Maybe we're too focused on the scale we work in. Maybe we are too focused on just some of the issues. Maybe we're only working or only focusing on the environmental point of view or on the energetic point of view. And we have to coordinate ourselves to be able to tackle this issue in a coherent manner. Who we have to coordinate, and we have to really find the struggles that we can coordinate in to make a more decent and a more strong movement. But to reach this coordination, we have to reflect upon what are we building, how are we coordinating. Since I've been working as an activist, not just voluntarily, but working professionally about it, I have faced several networks that are actually working as networks, maybe all of the time or some of the time, and some networks or some organizations that are actually working as an umbrella, where only one organization maybe is carrying the lead. And it's not something better or worse. It's something that I think we have to reflect upon, because we know that the full horizontality of a movement can be very time consuming, can be just disencouraging, but we have to consider how we are working and what we want to achieve, why we want to achieve it, and when we need to work as a completely horizontal network, and when we can achieve or when we can accept working just quotation marks as an umbrella. These organizations at the same time have to aim at linking the European scale and the local scale. We have seen some presentations or some sessions that are very focused on the solidarity aspect and are focused on the local scale, local movements like the ones we're going to see afterwards in the Alliance Against Energy Poverty and the Food Poverty Action. And we have also seen a lot of MEPs, and the European representatives from the European Commission bringing out their perspectives, but we're still missing some key actors. For example, for the following forum or during the following months, it would be great to start identifying some municipal governments or even some national governments, but particularly maybe some municipal governments that are leading the fight against energy poverty, and that we can coordinate sessions in which maybe European movements can talk to local governments and local movements can talk to the MEPs to broaden our scope, our overall scope, and the solutions that we can find together to tackle this issue that is at hand. And going over this link between European movements and the local grass movements, we also have to consider urgently how these grassroots movements that are going to be probably one of the key actors or the key roles that are going to be able to mobilize people, how we achieve to upscale this movement, to not have in just some particular regions a really powerful movement that is engaging people, but how to reproduce that sort of movement throughout Europe. How can we reproduce it? And also, what is the maximum scale that this movement can have while being still coherent and robust? We're going to see some really good examples of the work that is being done, again, by the Food Poverty Action and by the Alliance Against Energy Poverty, and also some of the really good work that is being carried out linked to labor at a European scale. But we really need to link all of these movements, reproduce them, and sort of come up with a way that we can sort of almost not artificially create these sort of movements, but be able to really kickstart these movements. So we don't really need 5 years, 2 years, 10 years to have a robust movement, but we can start producing these sorts of movements throughout the whole of Europe in a nutshell, because in a short time, because again, we don't have time to waste reaching this right to energy. Thank you very much. And I'll leave the floor back to Felix, who will talk about the labor perspective of the right to energy movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Javier, for your presentation and for giving me the floor also. I will try to share again my screen, if it works. There we go. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, I work for the European Trade Union Confederation, and maybe some of you might wonder why workers' representatives are active on the topic of energy poverty, which may seem a bit far away from traditional workers' demands and the workplace, actually. Maybe let me start by explaining in a few words why energy poverty is relevant for us as trade unions. First of all, it's clear that the fight against energy poverty is strongly related to the core values of trade unionism. Trade unions were created to fight against inequalities and to promote solidarity among people, so it is logical for us to be active on this topic. Second, we are also well aware that most of the time, climate and energy policies create regressive distributional effects. In other words, climate policies and climate change affect much more the poorest part of society, who are much less responsible for the increase in greenhouse gas emission. So fighting against energy poverty is also a matter of social justice for us. Third, as trade union, we've been for a long time advocating for a just transition at different levels, at the very macro level in the Paris Agreement, at the EU level, and also in the different sectoral and company level. And fighting energy poverty and ensuring a right to energy for everyone is for us a core element of that just transition, even though not the only one, of course. And finally, energy poverty is first and foremost about poverty. And this issue is thus very much about ensuring that everyone has the right to decent jobs and decent working conditions. And one way of fighting energy poverty is also to ensure that workers are paid fair wages and that everyone has access to decent work. So as you can understand, having an ambitious social agenda, including in the world of work, is an essential part of the fight against energy poverty. And in the rest of my presentation, I will focus on the challenges that we see coming from the climate transition, from our workers' perspective, and how these challenges can interact with the European pillar of social rights. So in our trade union perspective, the transition to climate neutrality brings at least 5 challenges for workers and citizens that can further increase poverty and therefore energy poverty. The first challenge is that the new jobs that will be created in green industries will not always coincide geographically with the jobs that will be lost in other traditional sectors. And those traditional sectors are often concentrated in very specific regions. This means that some regions will benefit from the green transition with new jobs, new economic opportunities, etc., while some others will suffer from the negative impact. And if not well managed, this could lead to industrial desertification, unemployment, restructuring processes, and all this means that households would have more difficulties to pay, notably their energy bills. On the map here, you can see the share of employment in energy-intensive industries and automotive manufacturing in Europe. And on the right side, you can see the numbers of jobs in coal mines, and you can see here the regional dimension of the distribution. Similarly, on this map, you can see on the left the wind power potential and the solar power potential on the right. And you can see that the regions in these maps do not coincide automatically with the others. So here, the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights, which is kind of the social agenda of the European Union so far, is crucial to manage these impacts. And I particularly flagged 4 principles. First, active support to employment. Second, information and protection in case of dismissals. Third, social dialogue and involvement of workers. And fourth, unemployment benefits. The second challenge that we see is that new jobs created in the transition do not match the current skills of the workforce. And therefore, we cannot expect a coal miner to turn into a windmill technician or an IT engineer in a day. So for us, it's crucial that we provide adequate training program, reskilling and upskilling to those workers so that they can find jobs. And this is also valid for people who are currently excluded from the labor market and who currently are not, do not have a job or are unemployed or even not included in the unemployment numbers. So in the meantime, of course, these people need adequate social protection during the transition. And I point out to also education, training and lifelong learning and equal opportunities as well. The third challenge that we see is that it's not yet guaranteed that the working conditions in the green jobs will be as good as in those highly unionized sectors that are traditionally associated with energy-intensive industries. So to take an example, the renovation wave or the renovation of building will create many local jobs. But at the moment, these jobs are characterized by poor quality jobs with social dumping, zero-hour contact or informal work. And this is, of course, not what we want as trade union and what we shouldn't aim when it comes to energy poverty. I take here the example of a title from The Guardian that is particularly striking, which is about migrant worker building a 2.6 billion wind farm and which were paid a fraction of minimum wage. I can imagine that this is not only an issue when it comes to workers' rights, but also that these people could have some trouble paying their energy bills as well. Similarly, when it comes to working conditions, we often talk about circular economy as a way to create many local jobs, which is true. But we also need to realize that these jobs at the moment are not so good when it comes to health and safety conditions. You can see on the slide here the reality of the workers that are there, and also when it comes to pay and wages. So it's important that when we manage this transition, we ensure these good conditions. Here, I think the principles related to wages, gender equality, health and safety at work are also very much relevant. The fourth challenge that we see, and I guess that's the one that is the most important also for the Right to Energy Coalition, is that climate policies such as carbon taxes can have strong regressive distributional effects. And if nothing is done to mitigate these effects, the transition will affect proportionally much more the low-income households. And this could increase energy poverty across Europe. You are probably aware that at EU level at the moment there are discussions to put in place a carbon price on the transport and construction sectors, and if not properly designed, those mechanisms could actually increase energy poverty. So we need to be really attentive to that. I take, of course, here this image of the Gilets jaunes. I don't tell the story. I think everybody is aware of it. But of course, here again, the principles of the European Pillar of Social Rights are very important when it comes to equal opportunities, minimum income for people, and also housing and assistance for homeless. And finally, maybe the last challenge I want to mention here is that besides mitigation measures, climate change consequences will also impact citizens and workers in many ways. The rise in temperature will increase the health and safety risk for outdoor workers, such as in construction and agriculture. Extreme weather events will increase the stress on our public service workers, healthcare systems, and social protection systems. And when it comes to the energy pores, of course, the rise in temperature, for example, will increase the energy needs in terms of cooling in the south of Europe. The extreme weather events will also make it more difficult for people. So it's also a dimension that we need to to be attentive. So to prevent those change to increase inequality and poverty, for us, it's important that social protection systems are in place and are strengthened, as well as public services. And I think the COVID crisis really well illustrated this need for strong social protection and public service when it comes to the resilience of our societies. So this is all in a nutshell how we see the interaction between the European, the pillar of social right and the Green Deal. And maybe let me conclude by saying that if we want social acceptance of climate policies and we want to truly fight energy poverty, we need a closer integration of these principles in the European Green Deal than what we have. At the moment, what we see at the EU level is an ambitious agenda when it comes to climate, with a lot of legislative text being proposed as part of the Fit for 55 package. But we do not see the same urgency from our policymakers and willingness to develop the corresponding social legislation we need. So, for example, the Commission proposed the creation of a Just Transition Fund or a social climate fund to help and finance a little bit and mitigate the regressive effects. But what we see is that so far these proposals are too limited in terms of size and scope, and we need more in order to tackle the social aspects. Besides, we as trade unions, we are also asking for more concrete legislation proposal at the EU level to make sure that new jobs created are decent jobs with decent working conditions, good wages, etc. And the Council, the Commission recently proposed Council recommendations to provide guidance for Member States to tackle those aspects. But for us, recommendations to Member States are not enough. If we are developing hard laws for climate, we need to develop also hard laws for the social agenda. I will end my presentation here, and I am, of course, happy to answer any question at the end of the session. But before that, I would like to now pass the floor to the next speaker to provide us with their on-the-ground perspective on energy poverty. And I don't know if Diane is here already.
I think we will pass for now to Cristina Garcia from Alliance Against Energy Poverty, the Alliance Against Energy Poverty. Again, the Alliance Against Energy Poverty has been developing a great work, in particular in Catalonia, regarding energy poverty. Again, they have achieved some goals, like, for example, banning disconnections or being able to recoup, so families can recoup the money that they owed in theory to energy companies. But I think that Cristina will go over their goals much better than I can do. So please, Cristina, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for coming.
Hola, buenas tardes. Bien, soy Cristina y soy de la Alianza contra la Pobreza Energética, ¿vale? Bien, voy a compartir con todas, bueno, un poco ya de nuestras experiencias últimas en la lucha contra la pobreza energética y un poco pues el camino que nos queda, ¿vale? Bueno, pronto hará un año que conseguimos que el gobierno de Cataluña, el gobierno de aquí de la región nuestra, firmará el convenio con Endesa para condonar las deudas de las facturas eléctricas para con las familias vulnerables. Entonces, si bien no nos pueden cortar los suministros, ¿vale? Pero acumulamos deudas por las facturas y conseguimos la condonación, ¿vale? Actualmente tenemos en marcha también una comisión de trabajo por los cortes de luz que sufren muchos barrios a nivel de todo el estado, ¿vale? A nivel de toda España, por el mal estado de la red eléctrica. Entonces estamos en contacto permanente con las diferentes asociaciones vecinales, poniendo en orden sus demandas y trasladarlas al Ministerio de Energía del Estado español, ¿vale? Entonces, bueno, bien, siguiente, pues bueno, siguiente cuestión. A ver, pensamos que las principales causas de la pobreza energética son los elevados precios de la energía, puesto que los servicios básicos están privatizados, así como las viviendas, que también son ineficientes y igualmente privatizadas, ¿vale? Bueno, las consecuencias, pues en nuestras asambleas lo que mayormente vemos es, a ver, sobre todo afecta a la salud mental de las afectadas, nos afecta. Sobre todo a la salud mental y, bueno, y físicas también, por supuesto. Sobre todo, bueno, somos mujeres la mayoría, porque, bueno, somos las que llevamos en la casa, digamos, o sea, somos en mayoría la cabeza de familia, ¿vale? Somos mayoría las que acudimos a los asesoramientos que hacemos. Bueno, para abordar estos problemas, también como consecuencia, ¿no?, de sufrir pobreza energética, pues ya llevamos un tiempo que nos reunimos cada 15 días en un espacio de confianza, ¿vale?, que llamamos apoyo mutuo. Es un grupo de confianza, también está, bueno, nos lidera un terapeuta que también es el voluntario en la Alianza contra la Pobreza Energética, donde, bueno, quien quiere verbaliza sus miedos y preocupaciones. Y esto nos ayuda mucho más a afrontar el día a día. Bien, no sé si me he dejado algo, pero bueno. Ya el último punto, a ver. Nuestras demandas principales a los gobiernos, ¿vale? Es, bien, a nivel de Cataluña, se ha empezado por la mayor distribuidora que hay aquí, que es Endesa, y ya han firmado los convenios, pero bueno, falta todavía otras operadoras, como son Naturgy, Iberdrola, EDP, etcétera, que tenemos que bueno, para seguir presionando para que firmen los convenios y poder condonar las deudas a las familias de las facturas. Entonces, a nivel estatal, a nivel español, ya hemos empezado un poco, ¿no? Vamos a trabajar para que haya una tarifa social garantista y que se puedan acoger el mayor número de personas vulnerabilizadas, puesto que el bono social, bueno, hablando claro, es una chapuza, ¿vale? Y bueno, y tiene también muchas trabas burocráticas para las familias. Y si ya eres mayor, pues ya, bueno, en fin, mayor de edad, quiero decir, las personas mayores, es casi imposible, ¿no?, conseguir el bono social. Y bueno, y a nivel europeo, pues vamos a luchar para que haya una regulación de los precios de la energía y proteger así a las personas, ¿vale? Lo primero somos las personas y no los mercados. Bien, pues no sé, tenía algo más. Yo por mí lo que llevaba ya trabajado lo he dicho, pero bueno, que es necesario para que, no sé, para que los movimientos, no sé si seguir un poquito más, no sé si he agotado mi tiempo.
Puedes seguir un poco si quieres y si no damos paso a Diane de Fuel Poverty Action y luego hacemos un poco una sesión, un final de más mesa redonda y vamos mencionando estos temas si quieres.
De acuerdo, bueno, pues que hable el siguiente ponente.
Okay, thank you very much, Cristina.
De nada.
Felix, if you want to grab the floor for the moment. Sorry. So next one speaking will be Diane from Food Poverty Action, who we have already heard a little bit of you from Ruth during these sessions, but again, I think that knowing your future steps regarding the successes that you've already had as a food poverty action, sorry, will be great to know where we stand, all of us as different movements, and to what to look up to. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Diane, Fuel Poverty Action, FPA, I'm going to say, make it easier. And I've been part of it for about 10 years, nearly the beginning. And I'll tell you what I've written, because this is an amazing and very special point in the history of the planet Earth, because the pandemic brought the world to a halt. And we've been given time to stop and think, to review our situation, see what's wrong and do something to change it. I mean, I personally can see it's an amazing time. Human beings are able to think and do stuff, aren't they? Aren't they? We need to transition to a fairer system, and now's the time to do it. Governments don't really understand, we all know that, which is why we, as an organised and integrated collaborative group of people, might stand a chance of getting a word in. Together, if we can devise a plan and present it to the world stage, or maybe we do it just one country at a time, we'll do the UK in that case. So what's actually happening? The pandemic has highlighted the fact that there's a huge amount of inequality everywhere. And we're using the resources of the earth in a terrible way. Fuel-wise and energy-wise, we're in a really bad state. First of all, we're bleeding the planet to death. The powers that be have realised that we need to phase out fossil fuels, but they're not really making any positive moves towards actually doing that. And on an individual basis, there's a massive gap between the haves and the have-nots. The UK in particular, we've got some people who are able to take advantage and make savings by using dual fuel deals and direct debits. They have the ability to turn the heating on when they're on the way home in the car, and it's time to come on when they wake up in the morning. So they get dressed in a lovely warm house. However, there are the other people, and there are lots of the others, who are only able to have the heating on when they have money. They have prepayment meters, PPMs, and when the money runs out, which of course it does, then that's the end of keeping warm. And on top of that, the way the system is structured, those with PPMs actually pay the highest tariff. They've got no access to dual fuel deals, and they're being punished for being poor.
Diane.
However, the price of gas in particular is rising. So
Diane, this is so amazing, but I just want to say there's Spanish translators, so I just want to ask if you could slow down, because I want to make sure that we're getting every single word you say. Thank you.
Let's go really quick, because getting into 10 minutes. I can slow down, definitely. It'd be much better for me too.
Yeah, no, take your time, as much time as you need.
Thank you. Okay. It's all, you've got it all so far, have you? I mean, sure, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
yes, it's fantastic. I just want to make sure it's all getting across to our Spanish allies.
Okay, so I got to, well, however, the price of gas in particular is rising, so that even the people who have money will be struggling. So the next level of people do have what could be called a better standard of living, and we'll call them the haves. They own their property. They're sort of, generally speaking, they've actually got mortgages, so the bank owns the property. But on the surface, they're in a position to and can pay without a PPM. Their houses, but the houses are inefficient. They need better insulation, and even though the general standard of living is reasonable, they can't afford to make the changes necessary to keep the bills low. Both these cases, and in fact all of them, are struggling at the moment. One of the biggest problems is that most of the buildings are badly built. Lots of them were built after the war, and I think in those days nobody had heard of insulation and warmth and comfort. It's badly distributed, so energy, heating is part of that. I remember listening to a radio program in 1973, so ages ago, where they spoke about insulation. Yes, it was 1973, but they were referring to Sweden, saying that because they had snow on the ground for a long part of the winter, they created great solutions to insulation and to roads and travel. But because in England, we don't really suffer so much. The snow never lasts for very long, so nobody makes any effort to come up with better ways to live. And before we know it, the sun's shining again and life goes on. However, yes, we were aware of those problems and we could have been making changes for a long time. In fact, years ago, there was a warm homes programme, but funding was cut. Also, fairly recently, the government offered the Green Homes Grants programme on the surface to make themselves look greener, as they were seeming to encourage folk to use solar panels and change their boilers. But basically, it was exactly that. It was all on the surface. The scheme was built to fail in that it was dependent on certified tradesmen only being allowed to do the job, which would have been fine, but whoever did the job had to wait 3 months after the job was finished before the government paid the money. So loads of certified tradesmen wouldn't do the jobs and other capable people were not allowed. For example, as an example, my own brother wanted to future-proof his house. So seeing as he was having to work on the roof anyway, he investigated his solar panels. But first of all, because it was a specialised job, qualified contractor, it was incredibly expensive, and even the grant wouldn't make that much difference as the guy asked to be paid at least partially in advance. My brother just couldn't do it. And now I spoke to him this week to find out he needs a new central heating boiler. And actually his son-in-law is a qualified person to do that job. But again, he can't do the job because effectively he has to buy the boiler and it will take 3 months before the government pays him back. And on top of that, there were so many regulations. Every time they looked at the paperwork, another hiccup appeared. And it was so complex that the whole thing just became null and void. And I guess that happened to a lot of people. In fact, while I was talking to him, my brother said he'd love to know just how many green grants were actually given. I had to tell him I can't help him. He'll have to do that himself. But it's very clear that the system was designed to fail. And fossil fuel companies can carry on playing their game backed by government because they're given huge subsidies. They're all very happy, thank you. So on top of that, also at the moment, there's lots of building work going on, but it's all booked up for years in advance. So the bigger companies are lining their pockets, as many Polish and other Eastern European builders have all left the country because of Brexit, which is another issue. And finally, the value of the pound has gone down and affects everything. And on top of all that, the cost of building materials has risen exponentially because of all the fuel crisis. So big problems all round. The bottom line, basically, for ordinary people right now, we have a nation living in a state of fear. Oh, so how can we address these issues? Causes and consequences are inconsiderate structure, raise the bills, and lack of or badly insulated buildings. Just those two things for starters. So solutions. At FPA, we think that the policy of energy for all is a great solution. E for all would consist of a free or very low level payment band of energy so that everybody is in a position to at least keep warm. This would have to be adjusted and could be monitored, as some people, disabled people, for example, or older people for whom exercise is hard, they would need more than others. We are all different. But if a certain amount of energy is available at a very low rate, after which, as they use more, people pay more, overall, it would ensure that people had enough money, enough energy to stay safe and healthy. And if the new way is based on the fact that when you use more, you pay more, it would encourage people to be more efficient and use less, consequently helping towards saving the resources of the planet. Another possibility is to lower the VAT rate, but actually that's not a long-term solution and doesn't really make much difference. So we're not keen on that. And especially for people who use very little to start with, that doesn't really help. Next one, invest in insulation. Every pound invested in anything to do with energy efficiency is paid back tenfold. So an insulation program could be structured to retrofit houses street by street. It's costly, yes, but it could be funded by the money that goes into fossil fuel subsidies and could be borrowed at a very low rate. Just as an example, there's a green biofuel company that receives £1.3 million every single day. Imagine if that money was paid into retrofitting homes that are already standing but badly insulated. In the UK at the moment, councils could be rewarded for retrofitting homes, whereas at the moment, many UK councils are working with developers to demolish whole estates on the level that we have a housing problem, we need to build more homes. In reality, most homes that are built are not affordable for ordinary people. The word affordable is a marketing ploy, meaning that the number of newly built homes that would be accessible for ordinary people would be very low. Couple that with the fact that building regs are so low, building regulations, sorry, are so low that insulation is not part of the ball game. And after a short time, for those houses, retrofit is needed, even on those new builds. Okay, next thing to add, invest in renewables. At the moment, along with subsidising biofuels, we're using taxpayers' money to subsidise North Sea oil development. This year, the UK held COP26 conference. In fact, we're actually still leading it for the rest of the year. This was and still is the perfect opportunity to show some kind of serious leadership. We have the chance to withdraw from all our fossil fuel investments and create a whole new ballgame. Are we taking that chance? We should. How to get money? Take some from those who have some. The pandemic, as well as our present consumer-based society, has created a lot of people who've made a lot of money. There are a bit more billionaires now than when the pandemic began. And again, the gap between rich and poor has grown. So we have suggested a windfall tax on the huge profits of the North Sea oil and gas. The idea has actually been picked up by the Labour Party, which is fine, as it's a good idea. Also, maybe it's fine, or it's just time to ask for real help from the government. However, that needs to be help for the people, not for the fossil fuel companies. Government bailed out the banks quite happily when the banks collapsed. And if they bail out fossil fuel companies in the same way, they'll actually be directly feeding into destroying our planet and our future. So instead of paying out loads in subsidies and bailouts, they could be paying out to retrofit buildings and giving money directly to people to help with their energy bills. Loads of jobs would also be created, loads of opportunities for young people, more benefits all round for everybody. In summary, change the way we create the bills, change the structure, use less, pay less. Retrofit and insulate, invest in renewables, stop funding the fossil fuel industry, and government borrow now so as to save for the future. I feel to include for all people, actually, education. It's time for us to take responsibility for our own actions. COP26 and governments are not making the changes we need, so we need to access people power to make changes. We can all learn to take back control of our own lives by being conscious of how much water we use, for example, and how many rooms are being heated when nobody's at home. There we go. That's it.
Thanks a lot, Diane. I think it was a brilliant presentation with a very clear analysis of the cause and consequences, and also very concrete proposals from our side, from your side, that were very interesting. Thanks a lot also to Cristina, and thank you both for being with us today on this debate. I think it's also very important that we do not only remain in our EU bubble and on our theoretical discussions about energy poverty, but that we can bring all these different perspectives around the table. So I think it's very, very good. Maybe before to start the interactive session and to allow Q&A to the speakers, I would like to quickly go through the few key demands of the coalitions that were listed in our manifesto in 2019 before the European elections. And after that, I propose that we have both a Q&A to the speakers and also discuss this manifesto. So maybe I will summarize to you a little bit the demands that we had back then. So first of all, one of the key demands of our coalition was a recognition of the right to energy in all the legislation, and we asked policymakers to ban disconnections. This was one of the key demands, and we think that disconnections are a harsh and extreme procedure that can be sometimes life-threatening. Second demand is to provide adequate financial support for vulnerable households who already pay proportionally more for energy than others. And we asked as a coalition that to have some ring-fenced public funding and targeted support to energy poor in the relevant legislation. Our third demand from the coalition was to have massive renovation programs across the EU to provide decent, efficient housing for all. At the moment, millions of Europeans live in indecent homes that waste energy, inflate energy bills, etc. And these massive renovation programs should target primarily those energy poor households. The fourth demand that we had was that we call for more energy democracy and the recognition of local community energy projects, because these projects help to fight energy poverty at the local level, and they involve also the citizens in the decision making. So for us, everyone should have the opportunity to take ownership of the energy transition. And finally, the last demand that we had in our manifesto was to ask the EU institutions to develop a clear European definition of energy poverty to understand and monitor the issue at the EU level and in the different countries. And I understand that there are currently some proposals ongoing in the various legislative files. So some of these demands have perhaps been partly taken into account by our policymakers, some other maybe not yet enough. So the objective of today's discussion is to reflect together on what should be updated in our manifesto on the basis of all the discussions and exchange that we had. What could be missing maybe, and to identify what the Right to Energy Poverty Coalition should advocate for in the coming years. Just for your info, we will have our strategic meeting in February of the Right to Energy Coalition. So maybe what you say and the ideas that you have here maybe will feed our discussions there also. I will leave Javier to moderate the discussion, but maybe before that, to kind of break a little bit the ice, I thought it could be interesting to have a short Mentimeter questions. So normally you should see on your screen the Mentimeter question. And for those of you who have your PC or your phone next to your hand, you can go to the website www.menti.com and you can enter the code that is on the slide here. And then you will be able to answer. We have only 2 questions for you, just to break a little bit the ice and to make sure that everybody is able to bring his views. So I give you a bit of time to connect, and I will read the first question in the meantime. So do you think that the demands that I have highlighted from the Right to Energy Coalition manifesto have been addressed by EU policymakers so far? So since 2019, and you can choose between yes completely, yes partly, no not enough, or no absolutely no. I see that one person is connected at the moment, so I will leave a bit more time to the others.
Yes, in the meantime, maybe also if you have already answered the Menti and you have any suggestions or any doubts, any questions regarding the whole forum, today's sessions, and also particularly our manifesto that Felix just presented, you can put them in chat or just think about them and then just take the floor and post them directly during the session or during the Q&A.
Thanks, great idea. Okay, so I think we have a majority of no, not enough, and yes, partly. So it means that things to some extent have moved a little bit, maybe thanks to your work and the work of the different organizations. I guess for those of you who answered yes, partly, maybe you are thinking about the European Green Deal, which was launched after 2019. And even though it's not perfect, contains more ambitious and maybe the renovation wave and things like that. And for those of you who say no, not enough, maybe you can further explain in the discussion, but probably it's because much more should be done to also accompany the household and the poor energy households to make the renovation, to solve this problem of billing, etc. But we will continue this in the interactive session. Maybe the next question before we move to the discussion is looking at the current demands in the Right to Energy Coalition manifesto. Do you see any other elements missing and that should be added? So If you have any ideas that you didn't see reflected in what I presented, or you think the debate has evolved and we should put our priority or focus on other dimensions, please don't hesitate. I leave maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes for you to, or 3 minutes for you to enter it. And if you have several ideas, don't hesitate. You can enter a different one from one account. So feel free to add. So to connect, it's the same. Huh? You go to the website and you enter the number. So I see you're already holding fossil fuel companies accountable for their role. Jobs for energy transition include vulnerable people. I would add our FPA suggestion of a complete change of system as to how people are charged for fuel. I see also development revenue to pay local workers for local communities to develop local sustainable energy system and energy efficiency schemes with local authorities, industry, and local SMEs. Local communities must be equal partners. So here, I guess the really local dimension is stressed. Building energy democracy movements, energy system for people and planets before profits. So I think these are already a few elements maybe that can feed our discussion in February, and also actually maybe they can feed the interactive discussions that we will have now. I will pass the floor to you, Javier, to moderate this, and to the audience, please don't be shy. I think that we are really willing to have an interactive session here, so please express your thought and we will be happy to discuss. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Felix. So again, if you have any suggestions or any points you want to bring to the table regarding the next steps that us as a movement have to consider, or that you particularly in the movements or your initiatives that you're part of are currently worried about, don't hesitate to put up your hand. You know that there's on the bottom of the screen, there's a reactions button, and there you can find put your hand up, or if not, you can just type in chat. Oh, we have already 2 hands up. That's wonderful. So both Diane and Ruth, maybe I don't know the order, but maybe we can start with Ruth since Diane already had a session, and then we can go with Diane. So Ruth, the floor is yours. You're silenced, I think.
Sorry about that.
Perfect.
Okay. It's actually an update on what Diane gave, which was a really good overview of FPA's position. But just today, we've been considering with the National Pensioners Convention a demonstration on the 7th of February. Very quick. That's when they're going to announce how much they're going to put the prices up, the price cap up. And there's a complete outrage in this country. And we're discussing internally, not with Diane because she's been busy, but how to, how best to respond to this now with the possibility of a petition, possibly for Energy for All, or possibly just for a windfall tax. But I think that one of the things that we'll definitely be focusing on, and I hope others in Europe will be as well, is all the money that's kicking about that we don't have, because a lot of the fuel poverty lobby feel quite constricted by the fact that the government says there's no money. And the Labour Party also says, oh, well, we're proposing such and such. It's fully costed, which means that they're not going to spend any more than they're spending already, that they're within the parameters of what the government says is available. And in fact, as Diane said, there is this huge wealth kicking about, including increased wealth in fossil fuels and increased wealth at the top of the income scale, and the companies that have made billions out of the pandemic and so on. And we have to access that, because if we don't access that, anything we do on this gas price is completely out of proportion to the scale of the crisis. It's just, you know, throwing pennies at it. So I think that part of what we're going to be doing is basically a plenty of money campaign, a campaign with, God knows, memes, you know, everything we say, every time we go on the media, we're going to be saying there's plenty of money. Here's where the money is. There's all these millionaires that are saying, please tax us. You know, there's the fossil fuel subsidies. There's the huge profits. Now, pointing it out each time and how much there is and how that money should be going to people keeping warm and the transition. And I hope that that's something that will be part of policy in Europe as well, because I just don't think that without it, we do anything like meeting the need. And also, it is a way to build the movement. You know, I don't think there's going to be a mass movement for tiny little changes in benefits, but I think there is a mass anger at the wealth that's being gathered in one place, and while people are going hungry and cold. I think there is mass anger on that, and I think it could be possible that this, like, we'll reach a tipping point where we could contribute to creating the kind of movement that will actually turn things over.
Thank you so much, Ruth. There's actually something that Arenisa said on the last session in one of the working groups, that was that following where the money comes from or where the money goes, it's actually a great way of seeing the power struggles and the power balances that actually exist. She was applying that to like very local scale or very local project scale, but in the end it can be a logic that can be applied nationally or internationally even. And regarding energy companies and governments, it's very important to follow it up.
And
So,
the national
Diane,
and international thing can empower local movements for local demands, because people can see that there's masses of money.
totally agree. Again, we need to really see how we can link the local movements and how the national movements can empower local movements and otherwise. So Diane, sorry, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. That leads really nicely into what I want to say, which is first of all, governments. We're aiming at making governments make changes. That is what the national movement would be aimed at. But the thing is, what we all know, and why COP26 was on that level of miserable failure, it wasn't in all levels, obviously, I don't want to criticise, but instead of just only going to the government, we need to go to individual people. I saw a tweet the other day where I think it was probably the 10 richest people in the world, but it was a picture of 10 or maybe 12 people. And I think that they're not the only ones. There's lots of people who are also very close to that amount of richness. And if we put together a really strong coalition of people, FPA and all of you, you know, Friends of the Earth, blah, 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 lots of people with that same list of demands, maybe even shorter if possible, but because they could contribute, we could encourage people. I was talking to someone this morning and they were saying there should never be such a thing as a billionaire. Anybody with £1 billion in their pocket or their bank is out of order when the people haven't got any water to drink or can't keep warm, you know. So therefore, if we get a strong little package together and appeal not only to governments or whoever, but also to individual people, because some of those rich people are actually quite nice people. They're not all horrible. Some of them are greedy, and I could swear and say stuff, but some of them are quite nice. If we could put a proper little, look, this is how to change the world thing together, lots of them are working in that direction anyway. That way we build a movement, not just from the poor people upwards, but actually from the rich people in a sideways direction as well. Okay. Thank
you very much, Diane. Yeah, in the end, we're having currently the debate. We are having the debate, or I think that particularly during maybe the US primaries in the Democratic Party is one of the moments that it gathered more attention, the tax the rich, basically slogan that is quite clear and quite logic. I mean, after the Second World War, there was like a 95% tax on profit above certain levels, and currently we're not even close to that. So
and maybe if we don't use the word tax, maybe if we use the word gifting, if they can learn to gift, you know, you choose who you want to give your money to. You want to give it to clean water or electric for poor people, or, you know, like that. Because I think as soon as it's taxed, they don't want to pay it, do they? Whereas if you call it contributions, helping people, you'll feel better because you help everybody. Like that.
Perfect. So Martha, sorry, you also have your hand raised.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Martha from Friends of the Earth Europe. And first of all, this is so exciting. I just want to say how nice it is to see in one session people working at EU, national and local level to take action. And I think for me, this really represents the kind of unique versatility of this movement, and that, you know, the diversity and strength that this movement has. I have a question which I'd like to pose to people attending today and to our allies. It's a very kind of honest question of, I feel like at the moment, in the context of the gas crisis, in the context of the climate crisis, but also in the context of the EU Green Deal, there are so many ways that we can go with the right to energy movement. And I really want to vouch for what Ruth and Diane mentioned there, that there's a versatility of approaches of, you know, kind of demanding legislative change right now that is needed. And then there's also like a revolutionary angle and a revolutionary narrative, which is around access to clean, affordable energy as a human right, and completely revolutionizing our energy system for people and planet before profit. And I think from my experience, it's quite hard sometimes to balance between whether, you know, we have to pick our battles and win our battles in a reformist sense to tackle energy poverty in the system that we're currently living in, and also keeping this big narrative and justice focus that Diane and Ruth and Cristina just shared so well. So I guess it's an open question to people today, whether they see this kind of balance between the reformist elements of the right to energy movement and the more revolutionary elements of our potential. And yeah, I just would like to kind of open the floor if anyone else feels that this balance and which one we should prioritize at times. Thank you.
I don't know if there's someone who wants to take the floor and answer the question. If not, I can start, because I think that the either reform or revolution debate, especially among the left, has been probably a historical debate, and honestly, I don't know if there is a right answer, and I don't think that there is always be one of the both, because there are infinite battles and there are infinite battlegrounds to be had, and it's just very difficult to have the best approach to each of the situations. And I think that until after the struggle, you don't know if your approach was the most effective one or not. But yeah, it's really a debate to have what point of view we should have. I don't know. Diane, you were raising your hand, and both Ruth and Felix, do we have like so many raising hands? That's wonderful. So maybe Diane, Ruth, Felix, and then Neil. I don't know if that's the correct order, but maybe.
Just do a very quick sentence. Reform or revolution? Both. With love, via love, by being nice to people. Easy. It's time to be nice.
Yes, Ruth, please.
Yeah, I also think both. I mean, that's a very concrete question now. We're part of something called the End Fuel Poverty Coalition in the UK, which is debating which of the various measures, like, you know, take VAT off the bills, increase the warm home discount, you know, all these different things, which should we jointly put forward. We have normally, when there's been a End Fuel Poverty Coalition statement like that, we contribute to try to, you know, sharpen it and bring it to as good as we can make it from the experience of the people that we work with on the ground. But now, if we're going to do something as FPA on this crisis, cannot be our focus. You know, we have to go for something bigger that actually exposes the wealth transfer that's happening and the wealth transfer that we need, or we're just basically playing into continuing the status quo. So, you know, it's not that we wouldn't support reforms. You know, there's a lot of reforms we need, like stop imposing prepayment meters on people. You know, that's a big one. But we have to go further.
Totally.
And
Thank you so much.
you know, going further can put the other one in context and make it more possible to win on it. The hard cop, soft cop.
Thank you so much. So, Felix, what is your say here?
Yeah, maybe to answer this question, I think we can also look into the story of the trade union movement, because it's a question that is probably since the creation of the trade unions have been also there. I think it's my perception, but I think we actually need both as well, and they are actually complementary. So it's great if in the society you have forces that are revolutionary, that are able to mobilize to completely change the system, etc. And at the same time, it's also great to have forces that can propose pragmatic solution on the moment. So to me, both dimensions are complementary. I take the example of the Gilets jaunes as well. I think it was on the route a very revolutionary movement since the beginning. And I think actually the Gilets jaunes helped a lot for the topic of energy poverty to be tackled at least at the EU level. But I think this now, in order to capitalize on that kind of revolutionary demands, there needs to be a pragmatic translation into existing legislative files, etc. So that's where I see the complementary, and actually only reformists cannot achieve anything without the revolutionary, and I think the same is true for the others. So that would be my conclusion. Maybe one on the timing dimension as well. I think there are periods in the history where it's more easy to be a reformist, and it's other period where it's more easy to be a revolutionary. I think with the energy price crisis that we are having at the moment, it's probably one of those periods where big changes can happen compared to 10 years ago or 5 years ago, where everybody was thinking, okay, it's the way it is and we can only do incremental changes. So maybe that timing dimension is also interesting in this debate, but I have no solution.
Totally, I totally agree. Neil, sorry.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm really enjoying the discussion and the debate. It's wonderful. And just to go back to Martha's question, one of the things that came to my head when Martha posed that question, and I loved the context that you gave as well, Martha, that was really insightful. Barack Obama recently spoke to his young proteges in the Barack Obama Foundation, and he said that if we're going to tackle Black Lives Matters, you know, the equality and diversity issues in the United States, then you have to do two things. You have to do the policy, the boring political stuff, but you also have to protest. You can't have one without the other. You will not succeed, you know, if you just focus on one. So I think that probably answers the question about, you know, the strategic stuff and the revolution. And, you know, it's certainly a very unique time in our history with, you know, the pandemic, the huge unprecedented hike in gas and electricity prices. I've never seen it in my career. I work in the energy services industry. I work for Warmworks Scotland, but I'm also a community representative for my local trust and a citizen of West Lothian, Linlithgow, West Lothian, Scotland. I've also lived in Greece for 8 years, so a very different energy system to the UK in terms of summer cooling and winter heating mainly through oil, and the different pressures and challenges that poses. So it's really great to be able to share knowledge and experience with all our European friends. So I really welcome this, and hopefully we can keep this going and joining the dots. My personal view about energy is there is one major ingredient missing in all of the debate. And believe it or not, we had our MP raise a petition in Parliament on Tuesday. So our MP Martin Day, and I did this, you know, as a citizen of Scotland, UK, and through my MP and with the support from Community Energy England. And basically we called on the UK government for a community energy booster. And the idea of this is that since some of the subsidies like the feed-in tariff have been removed and other things put in like the contract for difference and the smart export guarantee and all this sort of stuff, it's not enough. Communities really struggle to get the development resources. It's not just for energy, it's for education, it's for social services, it's for lots of other things to actually develop things themselves so that we're more in control. So we have, in Scotland in particular, we have big local authorities, big government, big industry, lots of small companies, but the community bit is really thin on the ground. Even England has town and parish councils with £1 million budgets. Scotland doesn't have that. So, and this is a personal view, okay, but I just think that there's a big black hole in the middle of everything, including the campaigners, that if we're going to do this, communities have to be equal partners with industry and local authority and civil government, and we're not. Often because we don't have the representation, we don't have the time, we're just volunteers just doing this. And I do a lot of stuff in my free time, you know, night time and the weekends. We've developed a social enterprise around energy, as have many amazing communities around Europe. There's 1,900 co-ops, energy co-ops now around the European Union. So fantastic progress, but we're still so far short of the power that fits within, you know, the large corporates, as you mentioned, you know, the billionaires, etc. So I mean, I don't have all the solutions, but I think one of the things that the governments of Europe could do is to fund the development work that the green urban miners, you know, get the kids involved in looking for the opportunities for retrofit, not just our homes, but our community buildings, our commercial buildings. Ask yourself this question: how many commercial rooftops have solar on them? You know, and that could be done in a community way where the profit goes back into the community. We've done it. We've done it in 3 sports clubs here in Linlithgow. So there are ways that you can skin that cat if we're a bit more innovative about this. But I think, going back to Martha's question, a bit of both, but also there are some other tricks, I think, up our sleeve that we could push for.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that linking to the previous session, I think that there's a really great issue of narratives, because I think that as a same organization, we can carry out different narratives that can both tackle reform and more demanding issues. But it's a really, again, thin ice to trend on, to really be able to not antagonize some of the key stakeholders, and at the same time, so that you can meet with them, but at the same time be clear about the actual demands that we have and their need for them to be solved. I don't know if there are any other questions, or if any other one wants to take the floor with Martha's question, which again, I think it was really useful, and I think that it really sets the tone for one of the future steps that we have to take as the Right to Energy movement. If not, we can maybe almost start sort of the conclusion. So maybe I'll give 1 more minute while I'm speaking. Yeah, Felix, sorry.
If I may just to react on some participants talked about taxation, and especially taxation of the companies or the billionaires, etc. I think this perhaps could be among the further demand of the coalition to have a broader debate on taxation, because at least at the EU level, I don't know in the different countries, but what we see in the narrative of the policymaker is that they want to shift from labor taxation to environmental taxation. But the problem that we see with that is that at the moment, labor taxation is done in a very progressive way. So it means the people who get the biggest revenues pay a bigger share in taxation. This is not the case when we talk about environmental taxation, which is more like a VAT. So it's a flat tax that affects everybody the same, which means proportionally more low-income households. And we, as trade union at least, we are trying to push for a narrative to say we need to shift the taxation from labor to capital in order to get more investment capacity to invest in renewable renovation, etc. And in parallel, we may have environmental taxation to incentivize people. But the objective of this environmental taxation should not be to raise the revenues. So maybe that could be interesting for future debate, this broad debate on taxation, to try to avoid that the taxation on capital is kind of ignored from the debates. So that's for the EU level. I'm not sure about in every different member state. I know in Belgium it's more or less the case as well. So yeah, that's just some input from my side.
Thank you. Ruth, also you had your hand raised. You unsilenced and then silenced yourself. Sorry.
That's a really useful, is it okay now? Really useful way of framing it. Thank you for that. In parallel with the taxation question, there's the debt question, because what they're basically asking is for populations to go deeply into debt. And they'll have that over us for the rest of our lives. We'll be in debt to them and trying to pay it off and never able to pay it off and pushed into criminality and the rest of it. And in the meantime, they refuse to go into debt because they've got this golden rule, you know, that capital has to hang on to every penny it has. And I think that neoliberal dogma is going to have to be broken. And I understand that there's something about a 7-year budget and the IMF, there's something going on in the EU where they're discussing actually breaking out of it because of this crisis, because they actually have to break out of it. And when they have to break out of it, as with the bankers' crisis, they do break out of it. And, you know, again, comparing to the post-war period, not only 95% taxation on rich people, but also massive borrowing, which did nobody any harm. And you know, the levels that they're so afraid of now were there, and they were only used to bring economies back to life and achieve things that people need. And the idea that you're going to be worse off if you borrow to insulate homes, which is going to save, you know, 10 times as much as it borrows, so that whatever, you know, in future years, you're going to be better off because of doing that rather than worse off, even if you pay back the debt. You know, all of this dogma is going to have to shift. And I think one of the things that might be useful is the idea of Jubilee debt, that if you look up, there's a Jubilee debt campaign, which bases itself on the very old, ancient, like Phoenician, prehistoric custom of, you know, every year or every 12 years, whatever it was, you know, just wipe out all the debts. You know, that might be a potential demand for, you know, at least in some countries. But the demand that governments stop putting more debt on people and start borrowing themselves is also something that was put forward in the Green New Deal for Europe, which I really recommend people look at. If you look up Green New Deal Europe pillars, you can get it. And that has very well worked out policies, including for fuel poverty, including our proposal for energy for all. And it's all based on bonds, basically, which is government borrowing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So maybe to start concluding, maybe we can go over what your next steps are, maybe immediately, for both the ETUC, the Alliance Against Energy Poverty, and Fuel Poverty Action. I'm always saying wrong, sorry. So what are your next steps so we can maybe mirror them or learn from them, or what are your thoughts on what we should do next, or what are you going to do next, basically? Very, very shortly. We have like 5 minutes left, so maybe 1 minute or so.
Yeah, maybe I can start, and I will also pick up on what Ruth said. I think in the coming months, there will be a lot of discussion on the fiscal framework of the EU. So this kind of golden rule you were mentioning, which is part of the Stability and Growth Pact. And I think at least from ETUC side, we will be quite active to try to push in these debates at the very minimum to exclude investment in the green and social transition from these calculations, and at best to completely delete this growth and stability pact, which has been suspended during the pandemic. So this is kind of on a macro level. And on the energy coalition or the energy poverty issues, that it's more directly related to the topic. From ETUC side, we will work a lot on the social climate fund, which the European wants to create, and which is directly related to this carbon pricing on road transport and building. So this will be on our priorities in the coming month as well, and the Parliament is debating this at the moment. So yeah, that's from our side at least.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So the fuel poverty action, what are you going to work on the following months? You already talked about the demonstration on the 7th of February, but what are your key objectives on the following year, maybe?
It wasn't just the 7th of February. I mean, that's ongoing, that we will focus on taking the money that is everywhere at the top and in fossil fuels and using it to make sure that people can keep warm. And then potentially the Energy for All campaign. But we also, we do a lot of work on district heating, because a lot of heating systems don't work. And we're constantly working with people in that situation to get compensation and make sure that their heating systems do work. They're unregulated at the moment and they don't have the price cap. We also work with people who don't have cladding after Grenfell and are left in the cold because the cladding's actually off their building, including one of our members up in Salford is in that situation and they're absolutely freezing at the moment. And we do a lot of work with, you know, individual people who are fighting for things on their own housing estates, including sometimes heat pumps or sometimes not housing estates. We were involved with Storm Arwen, which was a massive power cut. So a lot of on the ground local work as well.
Thank you so much. Also, Niels was asking regarding Salford, was that in private or social housing?
Regarding what?
Regarding Salford, you were talking about Salford previously.
Salford, it's public housing, it's social housing. There's 8 tower blocks where they've had the cladding stripped off for a couple of years now. And the buildings are also in disrepair. They've got vermin, you know, it's a nightmare situation.
It wasn't City West Housing Trust, was it?
No, it's
No.
Pendleton.
Pendleton. Okay, thanks.
Great. So lastly, last but not least, regarding the Alliance Against Energy Poverty, both Cristina and Monica, I see you both here with your camera on. So what are your next steps, both local, nationally, etc.? What are you working on?
Cristina, ¿le das? ¿Te animas? ¿Te animas, Cris?
Me animo,
Cristina,
sí.
perdón.
Bueno,
¿Cuáles son los siguientes pasos que vais a dar desde la AP?
Bien, como ya he explicado antes, así un poco más extendido, pues la tarifa social, una tarifa social progresiva para todas las personas que estamos vulnerabilizadas, garantista para todo el Estado, ¿vale? Y no menos importante, pero aquí en Cataluña, sobre todo, seguir presionando a las otras suministradoras que hay, que como es Naturgy, Iberdrola, para hacerles responsables de la pobreza energética, que no son menos que la que ya ha firmado, que es Endesa, y que está firme en los convenios, ¿vale? Y para, bueno, para condonar las deudas de las facturas. Entonces, esos son más o menos los próximos pasos que son importantes.
Thank you very much. So we see that the money is there and that the energy companies can actually condone debt, so they have the money to do it. So that is
We
one of
should
the
mention
things that,
incomes as well, campaigning for pensions and a care income for people working at home unpaid, universal credit that they've caught, disability benefits. Those are other priorities for us.
perfect. Thank you so much. So it's already a little bit past 5:30, so we're gonna finish now. I'll just conclude with one sentence that is one of the things that have been said during the session, which I think is very important, that it's that sadly, it's a really good moment to be campaigning for the right to energy. So we really have to seize the moment. Thank you very much to all of you, and we'll see you either right now in the breakout session or hopefully on the streets. Thank you very much.